quickly introduction of myself. Thank you, Jan. And I'm very, very sorry that I cannot be with you on site. This is actually due to also an important meeting here in Zurich with a very known university. So sorry about that. My name is Adam Gontard. I'm responsible for digitalization, innovation, and technology at Swissmem. And I quickly want to introduce myself and what the thoughts of Swissmem are in this context. So basically, myself, I'm a mechanical engineer. I have some experience in hardware and software development. And also here, I am in charge also of the AI policy. In my role, I'm able to visit Brussels every 2 months, once every 2 months. So I'm pretty much involved in the discussion, what's going on and what our viewpoint is on that. So basically, just quickly, who is Swissmem? Swissmem is the biggest association, industrial association in Switzerland. We have around about 1,400 members. Most of them are SMEs, and they have an export rate of more than 80%, which is very important to know because we need to have a very, very close look what's happening in the European market, and this is important to us. So we know exactly what the trends are because we closely monitor what's happening, and those are the things and the most important technologies like transition, sustainable transition, automation, and data. And also when we think of AI applications, and we saw one of our most important members just currently, Gerog Fischer Machining Solutions, that showed that there are applications on sites. So we quite aware what is possible today, what happens in industry, and what also the challenges are. So talking about challenges, AI, yes, we talked about this, is it dangerous or not? We talked about AI analytics, but where's the data coming from? Do we have the right data to train the models? Yes or no? This is a question. And also we talked about, yes, do we need this AI Act? Yes or no? A little side note on this, we had a discussion a couple of years ago, 6 to 8 years ago, with the policymakers in Brussels, and they asked us, look, what happens if a machine decides to harm people today? And we felt like, this is crazy. How you think that? Because we have safety equipment in place, so why should we use that? And then second thought was, hold on, when we implement a piece of software into a machine, who is actually responsible for this? Is it the implementer, the user, or is it the OEM, the supplier? So questions arise, and this is quite quite important to know what's happening here. Also, security questions arise. This is a very, very big challenge for our companies. Okay, what kind of data are we using? What kind of data can be stored where, and what's happening here? So basically, our thoughts are very much on the Artificial Intelligence Act, what's happened here. And one side note here is we very much like the idea of having different application classes, such as where can AI be used, where not. So this is in this AI Act. This is defined in this AI Act. The Cyber Resilience Act is very important for us, is what happens to the IoT equipment that provides some kind of data, what are the specifications and needs, regulations, and the Data Act. Where is the data coming from? How can we access data? And this is very much on our attention and our focus at Swissmem. So this is basically my brief introduction into this topic. And some of those slides are very familiar to you, but I'm happy to discuss with you the points and the views on this policy and AI implementation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. Just to continue, I would like to invite Marcel Knecht from the Swiss Association for Standardization and the head of the core business and member of the executive board to provide his input, please.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here in EPFL. It's a big pleasure for SNV to be part of this distinguished event. Okay, first of all, this is the landscape of standardization. This is rather complicated. I'm very quick on the international level. We know, as already mentioned, from Ambassador Dubach as example, ISO and IC, the international standardization organizations. On European level, we have Senelec and ETSI, and in Switzerland, SNV of the ROOF organization for all the standardization topics. Below S&V, we have 7 different sectors. As example, from Adam Gontarz from Swissmem. Swissmem is responsible for all the machinery standards, but we have also SEA. When you want to build a house, then you have to follow these standards in Switzerland, and so on and so on. Artificial intelligence is a part of the IT committee, and the IT committee, this is located in the interdisciplinary sector. Yeah, the European AI Act, this has a big influence to the standardization organizations SEN and Senelec. They received a draft standardization request to develop 10 standards. You see there the different topics until April 25th in 2025. This is a very tight schedule, and the AI Act is not, the standardization request is not released yet. Therefore, the standardization committees are under high pressure to develop these standards. And to develop these standards, we need you, ladies and gentlemen, as all the stakeholders, because these standards are written from experts from different stakeholder categories. On ISO level, the artificial intelligence, this is not a new standardization topic raised with just ChatGPT. The committee, subcommittee 42, was founded in 2017, and the first standard was published in 2018. Therefore, the committee is heavily involved, and currently 29 standards are under development for artificial intelligence. In Switzerland, it's nice to have Turaj Ebrahimi here. He is the chairperson of our National Mirror Committee for IT, and the UK 42, responsible for artificial intelligence, is one part of his committee. That means all the Swiss experts are registered in our Swiss Mirror Committee. And then, of course, these ladies and gentlemen have the chance to participate on European level as well as on ISO level to write direct on the standards, because our Mirror Committee don't write a Swiss standard. It doesn't make sense to write an artificial intelligence standard just for Switzerland. We have to bring our resources into the European and international level. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward for your questions.
Thank you very much. Daniel, would you like to go next?
Yes, thanks a lot. Big thanks for the organizers to giving the chance here to be part of a panel. My name is Daniel Dobosch. I'm the research director from Swisscom, and we are connected to EPFL, I think now since 7-8 years, where we have a digital lab just here at the Innovation Park, having every year 20 up to 24 master students, 2-3 PhD students every year, where basically we work on topics of AI and machine learning now since quite some time. And it was mentioned that, this is nothing new, and also for us as Swisscom, this is nothing new, but it got a new quality. And instead of showing you some slides, I would like to take you a little bit on an emotional journey, about the question, what regulation is really needed in this. Is there something new? And going back maybe to yesterday, hearing Dragos Tudorache talking about that the new quality of what we're seeing is that we have now tools who are taking own decisions. So I might start to get afraid now of a microphone. Maybe it has some AI in, and instead of when I press the button to switch it off, maybe it will give me an electroshock because I said the wrong thing. And my heart rate goes up. And then I start to calm down, because when I remember, as humans, we are using some similar things. We are using some, with all respect, tools since ancient times animals that basically also take their own decisions, and we use them as a tool, not saying that, but regulatorily, from the law, we treat them as something like tools where you have to do some kind of due diligence, where you have to basically be careful how you treat them. There's regulations how you hold a horse or a bull or a tiger. Huh? And legally we can deal with this uncertainty that we are not sure how it will react in each situation. So I start to calm down. But on the other side, I look at the user on this tools, and looking that basically the term superhuman was several times mentioned, and seeing that basically it can solve tasks that we humans have trouble with much faster, much more efficient, better, taking all kind of tests that we humans struggle with, all kind of work test interviews, much better than most of average human can do. So my heart rate goes up again and say, yes, definitely we have to do something on regulation because there's a huge threat. And then comes again my teacher, my professor, my perspective in that, where I see, look, if I would need to teach a student and explain it 10,000, 100,000 times the difference between a dog and a cat, would I be afraid of that student to be somehow super intelligent? And I think this is this kind of roller coaster ride that we're all in together. Just to give you a few examples, and I'm pretty sure you have your own. Where do we really have something new? Where do we have to be thinking, can we use our regulations that we have today, our laws, especially about liability and who is liable for that? Where basically is that kind of, how is it regulated? And especially for us, where we operate more and more what is called critical infrastructure, where we see that there are dependencies from connectivity, from the mobile phone, from the internet, almost everywhere. Hospitals can hardly operate without connectivity. Fire brigades, police, all kind of services. There's basically the question for us, how can we make the use and the trust in this kind of AI systems connected to connectivity, safe and trustable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Maybe Sabine?
Thank you. Well, I'm going to keep this short. So I'm a professor here at EPFL. I actually work in generative AI, specifically in the domain of imaging. And so to use some basically technical word, we deal very much with disentanglement of information, so we can actually not just create deepfakes, but we can even edit the deepfakes. And so a little research agenda is also actually detecting deepfakes. But I have also another hat. I'm the president of the Swiss Science Council. The Swiss Science Council is an extra-parliamentary commission that advises the Federal Council on all things that have to do with policy for science. So that's specifically science, innovation, and education, again, specifically higher education. So some of you heard me talk yesterday, and I think I'm just going to keep it at that and then answer other questions later.
Thank you very much. So now you've met all participants of our panel this late morning. Maybe we go back to the Mentimeter. We had proposed to you this morning to actually ask some questions during the presentations. One that got upvoted quite highly is regarding the position of Switzerland on AI regulation. What do you mean by technological neutrality? Who remembers who mentioned technical neutrality again?
I guess it was me. Thank you very much for the question. So, yes, we have in Switzerland always this concept of technologically neutral, which means that we try in general not to regulate specifically a technology, but it just should be just a regulation on some topics or and the whole question is whether AI is seen as a technology or not. I mean, if you see the definitions which are used now in the Council of Europe or OECD, they are very careful about not pointing at AI. So it's always algorithmic systems, so to have a kind of a large approach. And from a Swiss perspective, we are fine with that. So we would have a problem if it's too much a regulation goes too much into direction of regulating a technology as itself.
Thank you very much. There was a follow-up question. It's like, what is the must-know for the EU AI Act? Would anyone like to follow up on that? So there are four classes of risks which are coming up. Would anyone like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, I can take that. Yeah. So when it comes to the EU AI Act, I think what the main focus of the EU AI Act, I think it's a risk-based approach to regulation. And essentially, you've got 4 levels. So when you think about it, it's like a pyramid. And at the bottom of the pyramid, you have those systems. And all of these are categorized based on the use of those systems and the implications. So at the bottom, you have those systems which basically are not very risky, and basically there will be no rules applied to them. Right? So it's AI using your inbox, for example, and saying what is a spam or not. I mean, there's no really regulation or any requirements for that. Then you've got another layer, which is a second layer, where you will have what we call is a transparency requirement. So here you, for example, the EU AI Act says, if you're a chatbot, then you should be labeled as such, right? And those are the kind of requirements that will go there. Then you have the next level, which I think is the most important level, which is really looking at high-risk AI systems. And this is where the whole discussion is at the moment. What are those systems which are categorized as high risks? And you have essentially those that are considered to be very important to us as humans, and for us as living in the society. So, for example, use of AI system in the health sector, use of AI system for criminal justice systems in the labor market. So these are the systems that are classified as high risk. Now, for these high risk systems, there are a lot of obligations in terms of documentation, in terms of risk assessment, in terms of many other things that need to be conducted. And recently there was a big debate to say, should generative AI systems also be part of those high-risk systems? And as those of you who heard Dragos yesterday, he said essentially, there was a thinking that was, at some point in time, there was a thing saying we should be excluding them altogether from the EU AI Act, but now they do feature in the high-risk system. And then, of course, you've got the top layer of that pyramid, and in the very top layer are those systems or uses of AI which absolutely are not allowed. So there will be bans, and here you are looking at those that are essentially kind of, subliminally impacting us. So we have things like recently, one which was added there was, surveillance systems, the kind of we have in China, for example, those we don't want to have. And there are some others as well, like recently also sort of emotional recognition and surveillance of in public spaces. So there's a big list, but I think that's essentially the essence of the EU AI Act. The only thing I would say there is one more thing, which Dragos talked about yesterday as well. So on the one hand, you have all these classification of risk, and then sort of what we need to be able to manage those risks. On the other hand, the EU AI Act is also looking at opportunities and innovation, and there are provisions in there for requirements for companies and individuals to participate in sandboxes, and ideally also to kickstart some innovation. So it has two sides. We tend to hear much more about the risky side, but that's hopefully answers the question.
I think there was a reaction from...
Thank you. Just 2 points. You perfectly summarized the EU Act. One thing which is often forgotten is it's a horizontal approach. We had in Switzerland quite an intense discussion about whether AI should be regulated in a horizontal way or sector-specific. And it was a few years ago where in Switzerland we would have a preference for sector-specific regulation, for instance, self-driving car, and then you see, okay, is there any problem? And if yes, you try to fix it with a regulation. And now what we are doing at the Council of Europe, and then the EU is a horizontal approach, which means independently from the sector, it applies everywhere. And the second point is, just to underline, it's a risk-based and principle-based approach. And I'm quite fascinated to see that this has been adopted by everybody, and you can't discuss it anymore. But there would be other approaches. For instance, if you come from reliability, if you think the whole system from the damage side, this would be a different approach. And so I think we have to be aware that the risk and principle-based approach is very broad, because you have everywhere risks, and the principles are so large that you have of all the principles also everywhere.
Thank you very much. There's a reaction from Adam, who's online.
Yes, I just want to confirm what Mr. Dubach just said. The beauty of the AI Act is exactly on the question, how is it used, and not what it is. And for that reason, it's quite a good approach, because as we also discussed beforehand, regulation and the technology is not in line. I mean, we're way faster in developing things than with the regulation or standardization. But this approach really brings the two worlds together, where it's quite clear, okay, what can it do, and where is it allowed, where not. But still, I mean, there's a lot of challenge in between, but this is the beauty of the AI Act, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I heard a word of sandboxing. There was a couple of questions I had from researchers yesterday when we talked about the workshop this morning. Can anyone elaborate on this sandboxing for research and the impact this might have for research being done in labs at universities? Is there anything known already?
I can start maybe, not really directly for speaking for universities or academia, but maybe for somebody who is, working together with academia. So this kind of questions when we're working together with our students comes up every time. How can we use data, and especially being critical infrastructure? Basically, this is a good question. So what even can students do in academia with data that we, for example, at Swisscom have? And in many cases, the answer is they cannot do anything with it, because it was not collected, the data was not collected for this purpose of doing academic research. On the other side, basically, what is then really interesting is all these discussions about, and this is also happening in the EU with 4 test centers. So what can be done in this kind of sandboxing, test centers, red teaming, this is a term coming from cybersecurity, where you intentionally try to basically find loopholes in this very complex system. So we try to basically have an independent team who tries to break the system. In our case, basically, would be to make generative AI do something that it shouldn't be doing, either curse or basically create some unappropriated images. So this kind of collaboration through academia and industrial partners in understanding where this loopholes, where basically one has to do the due diligence to make sure that the systems are under control, that we have to learn now together. And maybe using this metaphor of an animal, that we have a new animal now that we have to understand. How high do we have to build the fences? What are the rules to basically safely use this kind of animal? This is something that is really important to do together, and especially this kind of red teaming or all kind of approaches where you try to find the bad use cases and then be able to counteract on them. I think this is really important together with academia.
Okay, where academia can help, I mean, we heard that very clearly yesterday. Impossible for academia today to train, for example, a large language model. We just don't have the resources, right? That's a fact. We don't even have the resources here in Switzerland, except if we combine our resources all over Switzerland to actually do something like that. And then that would be something to think about. And the same thing with data. Data is expensive. And data is not expensive because it's not around there. But you remember, you have to curate data. Maybe that's what we can teach a student, that the data curation, data filtering, that is one of the most, forget the models, right? If your data is not in good form, whatever I mean, it's the old saying, signal processing, crap in, crap out, right? Same thing with machine learning. And so these are kind of the real world examples. And I think, and here I totally agree with you. This is where we can collaborate together, right? This is where we can actually teach the students the real world situation. Now keep in mind, if you want to do data curation, you need to have domain knowledge. You cannot, otherwise how can you label it correctly? How can you know this is good, this is bad data? And so never forget, putting the AI engineer or machine learning or data scientist somewhere without the domain expert will just give you, well, I already used the forms, I think I'm not going to say anything more here.
Just coming back to sandboxes, I just want to add one more point. So what is the reason why you have those sandboxes? And there are certain countries that are actually also using them. It's to help even smaller companies first understand the regulation and then also assess it. And give them guidance. And on the other hand, it's also because the regulators want to learn from the companies what are your issues and how we can potentially make things better. So a very concrete example, you're a company that is working on providing AI systems, AI-driven sort of decision-making systems for human resources. Now, human resources normally falls under the high-risk category. So the question you ask is, well, hang on a minute, am I really high risk or am I not high risk? So one of the things is that in the new EU AI Act, you actually have the possibility, almost sort of, you are encouraged to go and be part of Sandbox, which will allow you to then test your system and even come out with the answer, am I really high risk or not? And if I am high risk, what? Because you in fact, in the EU Act, you self-declare if you're high risk or not in many cases, which is kind of funny. But if essentially what happens is that you can go, you can test, you can work with the regulators, you can share your knowledge, you can get feedback, and once you do that, you have your answer. Okay, I am now high risk, and this is exactly what are those things that I need to do. So I think it's a great tool. It's a great tool not just for the very big companies, but also for the small ones. And this is where I think a lot of governmental work needs to come, where we should be having those not just in the EU and the EU member states, but potentially also in Switzerland and beyond.
Thank you very much. Would you like to connect this with your work at SNV?
Yes, please. All these topics you now explained, data accuracy, the human oversights, then quality of data set is a very important topic. For all these individual disciplines, there are standards who needs to be written under this EU standardization request. And once those standards are written and published in the EU official journal, when you operate an artificial intelligence, and then these standards providing you an assumption of conformity, and therefore you can bring them to the market. It's the same system as we know in the machinery sector. We have hundreds of safety standards for machines, and this is also always a self-declaration, of course. And then you use a standard, or you apply a standard for your machine, and then you are safe to bring the machine to the market. And the same behavior belongs here then in the end to the artificial intelligence. They are open in the market. Yes.
Thank you very much, Marcel. Maybe just a follow-up question from my side. So, who can get involved in these bodies that define the standards?
Yeah, we at SEN, ISO, as well as SNV, we know 7 different stakeholder categories. I know them. I don't name them all, but governmental stakeholders are very important. Research and academia, very important, and of course industry and commerce. As example, Gerog Fischer, they were very active in standardization on the piping systems, as well as your machining solution division. And these experts, they write on the standards and at the SEN and ISO level. And yeah, the system is very open for everybody. You just have to become a member of SNV or your national body. If you're, example, from India, then you can contact BIS, or in the UK you contact BSI, or in Germany DIN. Doesn't matter, and they operate mirror committees where you can access the draft standards and you can comment on these standards even on a very early stage, and therefore you know as a researcher or when you develop an artificial intelligence as your business, then you know what's coming on your business and what you have to expect. Yes.
Thank you very much. I think there are two reactions.
Maybe I can add on the importance of participating, actually. As you mentioned, GF Machining Solution, we are actually participating in that because it's very important when you do the standards to have the business knowledge. It's not only about the data, you also mentioned. You have to have the understanding on what are these actually data are doing. And without the business knowledge, actually, the standards, it's useless. So that's why for us it's quite important to be involved and actively be involved in defining these standards. So yes, I encourage that very much.
Thank you. One more time.
Yes, thanks a lot. And allow me a question and trying to connect the question of neutrality that we discussed before, and then of international standards and regulations. So does Switzerland, maybe to both of you a question, does Switzerland have a special difficulty role because of its role as a neutral host to many international organizations? And in my previous roles, for example, at CERN or UN, I can imagine that basically this is this part of a role of Switzerland to be this, trusted host, also in this terms of when also managing somehow that international organizations, people from all the world around coming with their own regulations and want to use these tools also when in Switzerland, or is that not an issue that you think that makes it especially difficult for Switzerland?
I think the experts out of Switzerland, they are very well recognized. We have here the convener of the JPEG committee with Turaj Ebrahimi, and the expertise out of Switzerland is very important. We don't can make any laws in Europe. We don't can discuss about an AI Act, but the Swiss stakeholders, they can influence the standards who are requested from the AI Act. In fact, we cannot cast our votes we can cast our votes on these standards, but we are not counted because we are not in the European Union. However, the experts, they can influence the standards in the working groups, and the text is written in the working groups and not on a vote you cast in a document management system. Therefore, it's important to bring this expertise into the standards. That's the only way Switzerland can influence something in Europe, of course, over the Council of Europe and so on. But this is a much higher level and not on a technical level, on level 4, as explained from Ambassador Dubach. Yeah.
Perhaps just one word from my side. First of all, I mean, perhaps the word of technologically neutral is not the best one, because in fact it has nothing to do with neutrality in the strict sense. But when it comes to neutrality, I mean, there are discussions in the Swiss government whether the fact that we are neutral, and as the AI and many technologies are about values and so on, whether there could be a link between neutrality and trust. And I think that's the reason why we are seeking for avenues, or how to say, where Switzerland could position itself also with Geneva as a kind of a convener for this type of discussions.
Yeah, I would just echo that, and that's what I wanted to say. I think for me it's very clear that Switzerland's reputation as being neutral is something which goes a long way for us to, in fact, play a big role at the international stage, if possible, in these discussions. Again, going back to what we talked about in my presentation, with the gap that currently exists, within who is actually discussing all of this, and you have a big part of the world that is not included. I do think we have this opportunity to have the Greater Geneva to include basically, the Africa, Asia, Central, and again, that goes to our geopolitical history as well, and with the 2 technical schools that we have also, with our rankings and innovation being the top as well. I think we really can position ourselves, and I think that, if I'm not wrong, is also a little bit the goal now, that even though we are small, we can actually make a big difference, and we can play on those values of pragmatism and neutrality. So it's absolutely, and therefore I think all of us in Switzerland should be engaged in this thing. That's my call for action.
From a business perspective, if I add, I very much like what you're putting, it's a neutrality and trust. And in the data right now, one of the challenge we have, as I mentioned actually during my presentation, is getting access to the data from actually other companies, right? Because the more data is expensive, right? And the more data we have, the more value we can add. And I think that with that trust that Switzerland have been built through the years, we could actually have a competitive advantage on building this ecosystem of data and make that available for fair usage. So I think definitely it's an advantage that Switzerland can draw benefit from.
Okay, I don't want to rain on the parade because that all sounded very positive. But let's not forget, exactly, let's not forget that right now Switzerland has nothing to say. Nothing within the technology, the hardware, nor the software of AI. And in general, Europe has nothing to say. And yes, in the deployment, and the development, we are not that bad, right? I mean, I have to say. But we're basically riding a little bit the coattails. So, I mean, we need to get a bit more active. And I truly believe in the long run, if we do not, within Europe, it doesn't have to be just Switzerland, get somewhat of an active role in the development one. Right now, we've talked about basically more the deployment, and I really like that distinction you made. We put ourselves in dependencies to other parts of the world that might, in the long run, not be healthy.
Thank you very much. Adina, maybe a follow-up question. I understand that there are some countries, they now put rules in place that data has to stay within their territory, like even data coming from machines. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, actually, this is what we are seeing is that data becomes actually the main asset of a company right now. And then actually that goes to the government, right? They understand that this is becoming quite the next actually battle. It's the data. So we have seen actually more and more regulations about either storage or actually cross-border laws. And this have put a lot of actually constraints on our business from a technology point of view, right? We need to put together the data in order to get more value. If now we have to run it actually locally, that actually disperse our value and what we can do. China, I think we mentioned it several times, they are extremely active, and then actually they really put the emphasis of the importance of data. They are protecting more and more that what it's done with the data, where the data is flowing and how it's flowing. And I think this is something we have to really be also very active and act on it. What is Switzerland actually dealing with that? And how that can have an impact on the Swiss companies that are operating in China, for example. So I agree, we have to get into the conversation and we have to understand how that impacts us, because it's happening right now. Our customers and our machines are running right now, are generating data, and then we don't know if in a week or 2 weeks or maybe a couple of months, we have not allowed to actually run anything, let's say, over there, or at least they have a silos. So, yeah, we have to act and get into the conversation.
Thank you very much. Any reactions on that?
Yes, especially China. China, this is as example, standardization is part of the economic politics, and several weeks ago we have had a meeting in Zurich on corrosion. 86 experts from all over the globe, but 40 from China in person. And this is just one example. And if you look on all the IT topics as well, if I speak with experts from IT security, the audience is full with experts from China. And on these 5 levels, we have learned this morning, I think Switzerland has to take the chance on all the levels to mark their influence over there. And not all G7 is not open for Switzerland, unfortunately, but on several other levels we have access, and we have to use the chance. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's a reaction from Adam as well.
Yes, concerning the data, and I fully agree that data is an asset and it's very important. And the funny discussion that we have also in Brussels sometimes is that when it comes to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, it's very much the need of, look, you have 95% of all data and we want to access this data. This data does not belong to you guys, so give us the data. That is I would say, the outcry that happens there. But when it comes to industry, and this is where I'm not fully in line with Ms. Dorthe, is when companies of a certain size are obliged to share their data because of this Data Act, then they say, hey, sorry, no, we cannot give you the data because this data is customer specific, it's some kind of product specific, we cannot share the data. So we have to be also very honest to ourselves is when we want to access this data, what do we really want? And also here again, I fully also agree with the point of view of Switzerland is that we are not really in the position of making this and say, look, this is how we want to have it. We can only indicate, and the standardization work is one of these possibilities where one vote of Switzerland is the same, has the same value of a vote from US or China or Japan. But still, we have to be very, very clear and honest to ourselves is what do we really want to have? Because in my position, when I lobby at Brussels and say, look, we don't want to share the data, and on the other hand, data is very much needed and we need the data from Facebook, this is contradictory, right? So, I mean, we have to find a solution here. Where can we get the data from, and what are we willing to offer for that?
I agree that ownership it's a very, very challenging question, and I think there is both advantages and disadvantages in sharing data, definitely, and that's why I think what is important is to have a discussion. I'm going back with what you're proposing. I think we have to have these open discussions and put everyone on the table, because at the end, again, if we work in silos, we were not going to be innovative, we are not going to move forward. So I think the discussion has to be there. What is the right and fair data ownership? But we have to have that discussion, definitely.
Thank you very much. Any further reactions on that topic? Otherwise, maybe we open up the discussion to the public. I've seen there have been many questions coming in, and maybe it's more straightforward if you just raise your hand and you get the mic and ask your questions directly.
Thank you. Mary Jean Buer, I'm at EPFL teaching design thinking at the College of Management. My question, it was down at the bottom because after a lot of thinking I came up with it, but it's just about the crowdsourced review of companies. Can you all give your input on whether that could be a complement to regulation? Because what I understood is the regulation will be, what was the word for it, complicated, let's call it complicated for everyone to decide and agree on what we're talking about. There's so many levels. So could an element be the public's review or like crowdsourced, sort of like Glassdoor, where people can give their opinion about how a company is, let's say, I don't know, a thumbs up, thumbs down, or some rating or something, to have everyone, including employees that know, because they're there sitting inside of the companies, tell how they're applying AI if they deem it to be according to, let's say, standards or guidance that's available in the moment, because of course that will evolve, and there will be people that know more and others that know less, but in any case, overall, people can discuss, have like, a discussion forum where they can discuss, and even that itself could increase the knowledge among this public that's concerned about what are the best practices, and therefore push the bar for the companies. And so a sort of self-regulated voluntary mechanism to managing that.
Who would like to take it?
Okay, let me be provocative, saying, you mean something that could be as easily manipulated like the ranking of restaurants? So, I mean, there's a danger in this, right? I mean, I think it's an ideal, but there's a danger in it. And the other thing that still needs to, and this was mentioned also this morning, is enforcement, right? So even if you get a 90% thumbs down, if you have a product people need or want to use, who cares, right? So it would have to go together with an enforcement. But, it's always the democratic ranking of something has been around for a long time. It just, in the age of AI, it can unfortunately be easily manipulated.
Yeah, and another aspect that we have to consider is that for the restaurants, it's basically based on personal taste, right? It's very personal. Here we are talking about actually the people that are voting, are they aware of actually what it's behind? Are they educated enough to know the regulations so that they have an educated, let's say, vote? So I would say, if that helps for the education, why not? But we have to be careful exactly what we are putting there for vote, and if the people are actually habilitated to do that. It's not just an opinion based on feeling.
Yeah, so I think it's a great idea, but once again, you peel that onion a little bit more, and what you find is, in fact, today there exists startups that are coming up that are sort of, basically exactly saying that they are doing that, right? So they're saying, we are going to look at these criteria on how certain companies are essentially, going, this is the declaration they're making, and this is really the grades we're going to give them, and based on that we'll publish it. And yeah, there is some merit to that, but I think the issue there is one, exactly, I mean, that can be manipulated. Two, it opens the whole Pandora box of, auditing algorithms, auditors that are coming. There's a whole market that is being created today. And the question sometimes I ask, well, who is really auditing them? And what exactly are they doing? And I think we need to be aware. So I think we come back to the better aware we are, the better sort of, and some of these things will have to be taken up by the governments because, I mean, we hope that they are neutral and we hope that they have the interest of the general populace and some of those enforcement functions and some of those checks and balances maybe can't be in a private sector or just, so it's also going to be who's controlling those platforms. So the idea is very good, but I think we've got to go 1 or 2 steps below to then see how we can put that into place. And there is a role for, the checks and balances, which we need to have as well.
I just want to fully, agree to what you say on that it also then has to be enforced. And giving another example is, unwanted phone calls that you can imagine. Switzerland, in principle, if you're not in the phone book or if you have a star next to, you should not receive unwanted phone calls. It's written in the law. To enforce it is something very, very difficult on the other side. And as a telecommunication company, we have to make big efforts to make sure that you don't receive these phone calls if you don't want. Even though that basically legally, it's regulatory, it's very, very clear. And this is also where I think that basically, we have to also not only think about regulation, but also how we enforce those regulations. So that even if we then have the right regulations, that it can be followed through in a practical way so that it really protects and it's not just a law that's on paper.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions in the audience?
Andre Villarreal with Innoverse AI. I'm an EPFL alum. I'm definitely very interested on the other side. I'm seeing there's data and it's super important, curation, everything. Then there's the black box, and then there's the outputs that we use. So this tool, this black box tool that we're now using more and more, actually will reshape our society, we've heard. I'm running surveys on the use of these tools for innovation. And what's interesting, I find, in the survey is that people are not necessarily wanting to make it part of their workflow for innovation. More than half. 2/3 of people are saying, no, not interested. Why? They say attribution. How do I know that this output that I create will be assigned to me? Who will decide that it's my creation versus the machine's creation versus, 80%, 20%. The other element is trust. I mean, people are telling me 2/3 more that they don't trust the accuracy of, AI-generated content that they could use. So there's clearly a problem of being able to make it more accurate so that it could be useful for innovation. And ultimately, related to both, I think, is this idea of taking it further into future agents that are synthetic agents that can speak for us. An avatar, like we've heard from Karine AI. I don't know if you've heard about her. She's now dating millions of people for $1 each. With her avatar, which is a synthetic version of herself. So this is happening, and the question is, identity. An identity for the future, where we can say you're dating a human versus you're dating the dollar, avatar version of the human. So I think these things are kind of related, and I think it's worth our thinking and your perspective. Thank you.
Any reactions?
Well, as to the second point, you can also think about it, right? I mean, at least they don't leave the dirty laundry in the bathroom, right? So that's my certain invention. No, I'm just kidding. The trust is an issue, right? And there is nothing that we can do at this point, because yesterday was clearly said, and it is absolutely true, these models still have a black box characteristics we don't know how to solve, right? There's hundreds of billions of parameters. Each one does something and might influence something, and we do not have the usage on it. So this is why we've mentioned a few times the data, or the quality of the data is an important kind of thing, because then we can maybe, and the knowledge in interpreting the result is something that's important. The idea of the trust I find very interesting, and I think the trust has gone down in those systems because so much crap comes out of it, right? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, okay, I have not yet put my name into ChatGPT because I know it's going to be not good information, but most people have done it, right? So these are kind of like, so to a certain point, we just made it worse, but it will get better. And I'm always kind of like, there's this old saying in technology that the influence of a technology is first overestimated, for the short term, but underestimated for the long term. So these systems, especially if they're trained, specifically for one application, these kind of mono artificial intelligence models, they will get better, and they already are relatively good. Now, as to the attribution, well, do you give Word credit if you write a document? Do you give Photoshop credit, Apple credit if you take a photo? I mean, this is kind of like the attribution of the thing. You're using it as a tool. You are not necessarily, let it create something. So this is actually an argument I have a hard time understanding. Use it as a tool. It's a tool that should actually, hopefully, make your life easier and not harder.
I'd complement that. Just 2 points. Identity. I think that's a very important one, right? And I think I sort of try to say that as well in my presentation. And there are some very interesting, innovative ideas that are coming. So one of them you might have heard is like, okay, you've got all these chatbots, but maybe we should make it something like when you have a driver's license, you have to go physically somewhere, and you have to register yourself and say, okay, this is me, Ayisha Piotti, this is my identity, and therefore now you can open yourself a social media account. Right? So these are ideas that are out there now in the regulatory circles saying, should we be looking at something like that? Because that would take away this thing that somebody can essentially just take away my identity and do that. Of course, the other thing is penalties. If somebody does that, how exactly are you going to allocate that penalty to that person? And there again, it comes back to enforcement, resources, structures. But yes, you're right. I mean, when we start thinking into these things, there are those ideas that are coming up. And what we need is more of those, right? For the trust part of the whole thing, I would say, we looked at it very much, and there are three elements that build trust, right? One element and if you take like, why do people trust laws? And in Switzerland, we do it very well. We trust our laws. And the reason for that is because first of all, there's high awareness of what this law is all about, what is the implication that it has on me. So the big pillar is awareness. The second pillar of trust is inclusion. So have I been included in the making of that law? In Switzerland, we have a direct democracy. People feel that it's very well, they are included, unlike many other countries, but that's not. And the third one is accountability and enforcement, right? So if you have a law that is then accounted for, there's enforcement of that law, which is done. So, you can have a very good law, but you don't enforce it, people will not trust that, right? And that is the kind of model, and I think this is a great model that we can think about in everything we do. Like, if I'm a business and I'm using artificial intelligence, are my employees and everybody and my customers aware of what I'm doing? What are the implications? Have I included them if I have a model? Like, do they know what is happening for them? And thirdly, am I having accountability structures? If we actually do those things, and take those as the three pillars, I think we could go a long way as a society to try to build trust. And I think this would be my suggestion, which is kind of global, but I think it can be taken in for each of us in whatever we do. And it also applies to this issue.
Thank you. There's another reaction from Adam.
I think what we need to accept is also this new reality. So trust is one thing, but what is also forgotten nowadays, I think, is that, for example, if I generate a text at ChatGPT, and all the information inside, I just take them without checking them back, without looking, is this true or not? I don't care anymore. I just have a result. So this is something that we need to also see, that using intelligent systems should be done by even more intelligent people to really use this as a tool. And for example, if somebody wants to buy a painting that is AI generated and is happy with it and thinks like, yes, this is worth $1,000 and why not? So this is the new thing, and we need to accept this. Also, if I'm, for example, a chatbot and you don't know that, would you listen to me in a different way now, or is this a difference? This is something that we have to accept. And I think we should accept it, but also think, what kind of information do we receive? Are they true? Do we have the possibilities to check them back from knowledge, from other knowledge? And this is forgotten. I think if we use that, and this is a brilliant tool that helps us everywhere. If we just trust it and just use it, I don't know if this is good for our society.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think that this question is actually shifting towards what do you own? Do you own the output, or do you own the process that led to the output, right? When we're talking about, the rights of a painting today, it's not only about the final output, right? The painting itself, but it's the whole process of how it got there, how the painter actually getting there. So I think that's what we have to actually shift the conversation, not from the output itself, but the whole process, right? So I think that's probably the direction that could help gain trust and then maybe solve this ownership issue also.
Thank you.
And maybe one comment from trying to connect what you said, Ayisha, and now also what was said basically on the painting is, at the moment we are in this turning point. Up to now, what was really, valuable or hard to achieve was, you had this example, of a call made by a car manufacturer, and it's hard to distinguish from a human. Up to now, that was really, really, really expensive. You need to invest millions to basically make a machine calling you and pretending that it's a human. In future, this value basically will change. It will be extremely cheap to have a machine creating art, creating a call, whatever, creating all what humans are doing. And then there's all these kind of ideas of watermarking or basically labeling all this AI generated content. And maybe we have to think the other way around. Maybe we have to basically label everything what is valuable, and the valuable will be more the human generated content. A photographer being there at a location should be able to have a digital identity that is maybe backed up by a government or even a group of governments, so that he can prove that basically the photo he took, where he took it, and that there is a news agency basically who stands behind that, and that there is an editor basically who guarantees and builds this kind of chain of trust in human-generated content. Because if you try to do the other way around, if it's like would be like with the invention of a copy machine, and you ask that basically the copies are somehow marked, and that they write copy on them, or basically on fake images, or if we do that the wrong way, we should basically think about what is valuable and what basically should be distinguishable to have value. And in future, this will be the.
I love this idea. You see, that's why we have this. I think I love this idea. I like to flip it. I think it's a good idea. What do you think?
That was the point of the question.
It is actually a good idea, but there's one thing that kind of bothers me a little bit. Why do we think that everything that's human created is more valuable than something the machine created? I mean, that is a little bit philosophical, but here, I'm going back to the deepfakes, right? Deepfake existed before we had this technology, because somebody tried to do it. It doesn't necessarily matter. Fake news existed before. It doesn't necessarily matter it's actually good. Just yes, it might help identify the real photo from the fake one, but I can still, manipulate the photo in the sense because it's been done before. So, yes, if there is a thing of saying, maybe I'm more saying, well, give me identify the trustworthy information to me versus the non-trustworthy, independent if it was created by a human or a machine.
Yeah, I didn't say that basically something with human generated is more valuable than something artificial. It's more about it's become easier and easier and easier, cheaper and cheaper and cheaper in terms of just pure time or money that you have to invest to do it.
And the last thing I'd say is that yes, that fakes existed, and we had yesterday Carmela Tronsko talking about people, politicians can be just saying fake stuff as well. But the fact is that the difference is the scale. The scale and the cost. The fact is the costs are going down, and the scale with which you can actually send one email to billions of people with the fake news is immense. So that's where actually I think the differentiation is between what we had a little bit before and what we have now. So essentially, again, maybe we're going to come into this age where we will say what really is true, which goes back to going to the post office and saying, I am Ayisha and this is my thing and this is what I am. So it's identity. It's about the identity from what I hear. So that's why I like the idea.
What an amazing discussion. I just looked at the timing, and maybe we have time for one more question from the audience.
Yeah, Turaj Ibrahimi from EPFL. I just wanted to jump on what Daniel said. So the idea you presented in a slightly different way has actually found its way even in standardization. In JPEG committee, in less than a year from now, in July 2024, there will be an international standard that would mark the provenance of any content in form of metadata that can be watermarked or in a centralized, decentralized, etc. And by provenance, it doesn't mean it is produced by machine or even produced by humans or a combination. It's a provenance. How it was created, when it was created, and then what happened to it in its journey until it reached you. And of course, taking into account privacy and other copyright and other. So I really want to turn now my comment into a question A lot of things that I heard today, very, very good discussion, many of them have been done, have been carrying out in standardization. And my question to you is that why none of you, or is there any of you who is committed enough to take these ideas or what you are doing into standardization? Because these things are happening. They didn't start last November when ChatGPT started. They have been around for 5-6 years. Some of them are already standards. Some of them are going to become soon standards. And in fact, like anything else, leaving this very important task that was mentioned, standards are important, what were our discussion, just to the few people who are experts and go to these meetings, maybe it's not the best way, right? And the more input is provided to these people, the better, and this needs really commitment. So my question, who among you, except for Marcel, of course, is actively or is willing to actively be involved in standardization of AI?
Thank you very much.
I don't think we have actually any choice of the answer, right? And as I mentioned, the machining solution, we're already involved on some of the standardization, and we are looking forward actually to be involved in actually any ongoing work around that. Definitely, it's something that I also mentioned in my presentation. We are committed to standards and to implementing that. So we already started at the level of the data. Any work on AI, we are more welcome to actually participate into.
Also, I can answer with very quickly, yes. We are active there, and Ambassador Dubach mentioned already the Swiss call for trustability and transparency in AI. And we are also discussing with a lot of different standardization organizations how basically we can give our input there. And yes, I can just say we are active and we want to stay active.
I think it's a really core question that you've asked over here, and you've heard from 2 businesses that are active. But now I'm going to go to the 0.7% of PhDs that are not active in that. And I think you've got to go again to say, why is that? What is the incentive structure? What is the resources that these people have? What is the time that these people have? So I shall not speak on my own behalf, but I would sort of try to speak on the behalf of the others that you would like to have included, that we know and we understand should be included. But this is where, again, policy comes in. I think we've got to look a little bit more into, if you want to have that inclusion, what is behind them not being there? And I think it's not always resources. So in one of the talks I was in recently in a discussion at the United Nations, there was this thing came up and said we need more academics in this table. And it goes beyond just their incentive structure. You know, are they really being remunerated or marked if they went into some standard organizations committee? Maybe not. But the other thing is also coming back to that language barrier, those understanding of those discussions. And certain times, I mean, this could be for academics, but it could also be for NGOs or for many others, that lingo which has been spoken over there is not maybe what they're aware of and they understand. Now, companies, specifically the big ones, have a lot of resources to prepare people, to make them actually aware of those discussions. So there, I think, again, coming back, maybe we have to look at those constraints, and if it's resources, if it's time, if it is incentives, and try to work on them first. I mean, people can do it, of course. Myself, I would do it, but I'm saying, generally, these are things we should be looking at.
So my answer is short. I'm a member of EPFL, and I have a colleague who's very active in the standardization. So we don't have to duplicate the things. Having said that, and actually a little bit following up on what's been said, it would not hurt if Switzerland had a little bit more like a real organization that actually works and does measurements and for standardization. I think investing a bit more in standardization might not hurt. I know we're very active, right? And we have, my neighbor can actually say that, but maybe having a specific research institute would actually probably not hurt.
In the end, every organization has to make its own calculation if it's worth to to travel the globe for the standardization, or to at least take the time to attend meetings online. In the end, this is a calculation nobody else can do, just the organization itself. But we have hundreds of good examples, and in the end it will save pure money. As example, Georg Fischer, they have a lot of their own internal standards from decades ago. They turned into international standards. Now, on the whole building environment, building technology, in the standardization, everybody knows that more or less 80% of these standards are originally from Siemens, and so on and so on. But we have a lot of engagement for small and medium enterprises. These are very important. There is also a EU regulation, 1025, to engage them. And in the end, every organization has one vote. Doesn't matter if it's Georg Fischer, 4 billion Swiss franc company, or an SME with one employee who makes a revenue of, let's say, 200,000 Swiss francs. Doesn't matter, all have one vote, and each vote counts on the standardization world. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
From my side, I mean, as a government, we are not directly involved in the standardization work, but we have been exchanging a lot with IAC, ISO, and also with SNV. And I think it's very important to understand the standardization work. I think important work has been done, but there are still also big open questions. And for instance, when it comes to AI, I think we still have to get used to this idea of life cycle regulation. And I mean, somehow standardization in the past was, okay, we prepare a standard, and then it goes to the market, you have done your job. And then maybe there is how does it say, different assessments coming up. And so I think now with AI systems evolving all the time, you have not this clear cut anymore. And I think there's still standardization community has also still a learning process. And I personally also think, I mean, the discussions I had was that standardization was very much focused on safety, product safety, which is key. But suddenly you have also to deal with ethical questions. And the discussion I had is that it's not so easy for you as well. So I think there's important to have this type of exchange. And then from a government perspective and from a democratic perspective, I see that now governments give quite big tasks if you take the EU to the standardization bodies. And I think everybody is glad and happy that those experts are there and able to do the job. But from a democratic perspective, it's not the best way as well. So I think there's also, at some point, if standardization takes almost over regulation, I don't think it happens. But then there should be also a discussion about how to embed those processes in a more democratic way.
Thank you very much. Maybe take this as a last word of this very interesting workshop this morning. Looking at the timing, so I hope you enjoyed the exchange this morning. If you have any questions, inputs left, please connect with the speakers. You see the details online. You might have realized there's a lot to be discussed further. And we hope that we will see you again in future events, which are going to be organized with partners end of the year and the beginning of next year, the WEF, it was mentioned. So please join me in thanking the speakers and panelists of today.